So this is the cover of a book put out by two people at the Ayn Rand Institute. And the book is Failing to Confront Islamic Totalitarianism. And when I talk about this in other audiences, I explain what Ayn Rand Institute, I don't feel I need to explain this here. This was at a panel that the Ayn Rand Institute and the Federalist Society put together a little over a month ago at UCLA Law School. And the panel was, the main speaker was Fleming Rose, the Danish editor who was involved in the original publication of the Muhammad cartoons. He was speaking about freedom of speech. But outside of the event, the Ayn Rand Institute had a table where they were selling books. Now, I should say, turns out apparently that is not allowed under a policy that the university has, that if any outside group wants to sell anything, they need to have permission. And in principle, at least it's a defensible policy for the university controlling what is, after all, its property, in part because if you sell things, you have cash, usually. And if you have cash, there actually is risk of theft, risk of trouble. And if there is such a policy and there is such a rule, and the rule is enforced in a content-neutral way, so for example, they just say, okay, fine, you want the permission, we'll give you the permission, but tell us how much cash is involved, tell us how you're going to secure it, is it going to be in a place where there's a sort of high traffic and maybe high risk of theft or low, who knows what. So they may have been in violation of this policy. But nobody said anything about this policy to them with regard to the book. Instead of an administrator, or at least at the outset, instead an administrator came with these 4 books. He said, this book you have to not stop selling, you have to take it down altogether. Why? Because its title is inflammatory. Yes, talking about Islamic totalitarianism is inflammatory enough in university campuses that you're not allowed to display a book at a university. Again, if Rush Limbaugh 10 years ago had said, this is what America's campuses are coming to, people would have said, oh, ridiculous scaremongering, paranoia. Remember, you're not paranoid if they really are out to get you. This is from the Hamas Charter. The Day of Judgment will not come about until Muslims fight Jews and kill them. So the college Republicans at San Francisco State understandably didn't much care for Hamas. So I don't think they bought a flag, I think they drew a copy of the flag and decided to trample on it. Well, it turns out the flag in all of that Arabic writing includes the name of Allah on it. Now, I suspect the college Republicans would have gone on with this even if they had known this. Turns out they didn't know it. But that was the basis for which the university then began a months-long investigation of the college Republicans. And eventually the investigation concluded, and not long after, the entire speech code was struck down by the university. And again, you'd think that a university expressing hostility to a foreign government, Hamas is the government of Gaza at the time, it still is, would be obviously permissible, and especially a terrorist government, but even non-terrorist government, surely that's what campus debate should be, among other things, should be about, not in the view of the SFSU administration. This is a book called Notre Dame versus the Klan, How the Fighting Irish Defeated the Ku Klux Klan. So a janitor was sitting at a university in Indiana. Someone complained, and he was officially reprimanded by the employer, the university, because he used extremely poor judgment by insisting on openly reading the book related to historically and racially abhorrent subject in the presence of your black coworkers. That was enough to impose discipline at a university. This was not ultimately reversed until there was a nationwide firestorm brewed up by the Foundation for Individual Rights in Education, which does a very good job in these areas. There's the Laura Kipnis incident from Northwestern, where she was writing an article critical of what she saw as over-enforcement of sexual harassment rules. And students filed a complaint alleging the very publication of an article, essay in the Chronicle of Higher Education, serious publication, was retaliation that violated Title IX. And Professor Kipnis was investigated for over 2 months. Now, I should say it's just an investigation. She wasn't punished. But as we know, often the process is the punishment. She is somebody who's pretty pugnacious, and more importantly, she is tenured. And when you're pugnacious and tenured, you might not care as much about investigations, although even there it takes takes effort to deal with it. It saps you of energy. It distracts you from your work. But imagine the message that this is sending to people who aren't tenured, maybe to graduate students, maybe to undergraduate students. There's the microaggressions thing at UC you may have heard of. Brief, subtle verbal or nonverbal exchanges that send denigrating messages to the recipient because of his or her group membership. And they're labeled one form of systemic everyday racism and can lead to a hostile learning environment. That's an important signal because hostile environments are in fact what is prohibited by many university speech codes. So it doesn't formally ban these things, but it signals again to people that it is dangerous to say such things. Now, as with many bad ideas, there's a kernel of a sensible point beneath it, which is that people who are especially in the business of trying to inform and teach and persuade should be aware of how it is that what they say, regardless of their intentions, comes across. Our mothers probably taught us this. My mother certainly tried to do that. It took a long time for it to sink in. And if the point is, look, if you say certain things in a particular way, you may be well-intentioned, but people will bristle. People will feel that you're kind of being aggressive towards them. And the result is we won't be as effective at teaching, at persuading, at pushing back the frontiers of knowledge, all the things university is supposed to do. So that makes sense if it were articulated this way. Look, here is advice on how you can more effectively communicate. It would be a very different thing. But it wasn't. Here is what you need to do to avoid racism, to avoid creating a hostile environment, to avoid the things that it's pretty clear will be very institutionally bad for you if you're found to have done. And then, of course, you can speculate about what could be microaggression. You can imagine things. You can be called, again, a straw man builder. But thankfully, the creators of this message did all the hard work for us. Here's some examples. Affirmative action is racist. That's a microaggression. That creates apparently a hostile environment. America is the land of opportunity. Everyone can succeed in this society if they work hard enough. And this is from departments at the University of California themselves. Here is a poster that was put up in January of 2015 at the University of Minnesota. And it wasn't put up by Milo Yiannopoulos. It was put up by the University of Minnesota faculty members, tenured faculty members who are organizing this event. If you look at the list of people, this is going to be an academic panel, chock full of academics. The one non-academic is an editorial cartoonist, understandable because this is about satire and free speech after the murders, after the massacre at Charlie Hebdo. And of course, unsurprisingly, on the flyer is a copy of this iconic image, an image that I think will be one of the images of the 21st century, which is the first post-massacre Charlie Hebdo cover, which purports to portray Muhammad. How do you know? How do you know that that's actually Muhammad? But in any event, it purports to portray Muhammad. So this was the poster that was up there. And it turns out that there were complaints brought based on this poster. Now again, complaints, anybody can complain. You have a First Amendment right to complain. But the complaints went to Kimberly Hewitt, the director of the Equal Opportunity and Affirmative Action Office, who said her office had no choice but to investigate. There are limits on free speech, and that would be where you have harassment of an individual based on their identity, she said. No, by the way, the language, harassment of an individual, makes it sound like somebody, maybe a professor picking on someone in class because of their race or religion. But it's not a harassment of an individual. This is posters put up in the hallways. That was enough to lead her to investigate. Ultimately, she concluded this was not a violation of the policy, but still went out of her way to recommend to the dean that he communicate the college does not support the flyer's image of the Charlie Hebdo depiction of Muhammad. When this can happen to events that are put on by professors, imagine what message that sends to students. Imagine what message it sends to professors who aren't tenured, who don't have the kind of security that that provides. There are lots of other examples of censorship by administrations. University here in LA canceling a speech by Ben Shapiro. UC San Diego provost stressing that there would be that violations of a code of conduct are treated with the greatest seriousness and draw the fullest sanctions. What are the violations? People writing in chalk, build the wall, deport them all, Tritons for Trump. At Tufts University, a student newspaper at the university concluded harassed Muslim students by publishing a critical parody of Islamic Awareness Week. And then, of course, there's censorship by thugs. Speech canceled for fear of violence. A speech stopped because of a riot. Speaker shouted down, and then he and the professor who interviewed him being physically attacked. Cal State Northridge, this one did not make the news as much. There was a speaker who was a biographer, apparently an award-winning biographer of Kemal Ataturk, the founder of modern Turkey. Now, Armenians are unhappy with things that Turks have done. I'm not an expert on the subject. My sense is they're quite justifiable in their unhappiness. But what they did, instead of putting on a rival event or whatever else, they basically came in and they shouted down the author, and the speech was canceled. To my knowledge, in none of these cases has there been any real attempt by the university or by police to try to punish the people who are doing this. And the one thing that we've learned in life, as well as in such incidents, is behavior that gets rewarded gets repeated. The message that people are getting is, if you shout people down, the speech will be stopped and you will win. If you have a riot, the speech will be stopped and you will win, and you'll win more, because that'll be an excuse for stopping other speech as well. This is unfortunately what has been happening on university campuses.